Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today I'm here with another Guardians Rising deck analysis for you guys. This one's going to be talking about Lycanroc, both the Midday and Midnight form, and sort of an energy style disruption deck. So yeah, jumping straight into it, we're starting off with, of course, 4 Rockruff. Our main attacker comes from this guy, so we're of course going to want 4. We've chosen this one simply because it does have the corner attack, meaning that we can lock our opponent. Lock one of our opponent's Pokemon in the active every now and again when the situation comes up. So it can be useful in some situations, especially if we have a slow start. We can lock something our opponent doesn't want in the active and force them to have to use switching cards to be able to get out of that, which is really nice. It's better than just like 1 for 10 or whatever. So yeah, it's definitely worth. I think definitely worth running this guy over the other Rockruff we have right now. Running a 2-2 split of the new and old Lycanroc. So the old one was a promo, the new one's in the new set. The old one is a really good attacker simply because 2 for 30 and we auto discard one of our opponent's energy. So pair that with things like hammers. We're going to be trying to run our opponent out of energy in the early game and then start taking big knockouts in the late game when they struggle to respond to us. So yeah, 2 for 30 isn't great numbers initially, but with things like Choice Band and Strong Energy, we are going to be able to push this into high numbers, potentially push this into 2-hit knockout range, which is really big. So yeah, like the 30 isn't irrelevant because we can bump these numbers up. And then his other 2 attacks are 3 for 120, of course, and his GX attack is just 3 for 200, and you discard 2 energy. So once we get this guy going, initially we're going to want to try and lead with the Midday form to try and run our opponent out of energy, and really force them to have to use their resources to be able to deal with us. And then in the late game we can use his bigger attacks to start taking knockouts. And then the new GX from Guardians Rising is also really good. The ability Bloodthirsty Eyes is essentially Lysandre. When you evolve Lycanroc up, you get a free Lysandre as an ability, which is really nice. So again, we can try and disrupt our opponent, try and Lysandre something up that they don't want in the active, or Bloodthirsty Eye something up that they don't want in the active, and start poking away at that, rather than having them sort of have something in the active that they want to be dealing damage to us. So yeah, it's just a really good ability. It means that because it runs from the same line as our main attacker as well, it means that we can find these guys out pretty reliably as long as we have a Rockruff on the bench or 2. So yeah, he's also a pretty good attacker as well. Claw Slash for 3 does 110, so very similar to the Midday form Lycanroc. And then the GX attack, Dangerous Rogue-GX, does 50 for 2 energy, does 50 damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So a lot of the time this is going to be a good GX attack to use just because it's 2 energy. When our opponent is playing around this though, we do have access to the other GX attack as well, which is really good. It's a straight up 200 damage minimum before things like Choice Band and Strong Energy. So either way, our opponent can't play around both, because if they play around this one, then we still have a good GX attack to use. But a lot of the time, Dangerous Rogue is going to be doing as much damage anyway. So because it's 1 energy cheaper, we're going to want to use Dangerous Rogue towards the late game as well, mid to late game, for 2 energy to be able to just sort of blow up one of our opponent's Pokemon. So that's really good. Pairing with this, we've got a 2-2 Carbink line, 2 of the Safeguard Carbink, and then 2 of the Break. Safeguard Carbink I still think is really good right now, simply because there's still a lot of EXs in format. Volk seems to be really good. Things like Ray and Guardy can sometimes struggle to get around multiple Carbinks. This is also a good starter because we can evolve, of course, into the Break and start Diamond Gifting to power our Lycanrocs up. So this is like a really nice attacker, simply just doing a little bit of damage to start with, maybe only 20 to 40 damage, but being able to reduce the amount of HP our opponent's got ready for our Lycanrocs later on to start taking quick prizes just in one-shots. And also, like I say, being able to attach energy as part of an attack, attach strong energy as well as part of an attack from the discard, means that we can quite liberally get rid of our energy in the early game with things like Ultra Ball and Sycamore, and then not really be punished for it, because later on in the game we are able to get them back with the Break and start powering our Pokemon up from the discard pile, which is really nice. And then yeah, like I say, just the Safeguard ability is a bit of an issue for some decks anyway. So if you can set up a board state with just a couple of Carbink Break on it, or even just Carbinks themselves, our opponents are going to have to find the resources, find Hex, find their non-EX attackers to deal with these instead, which is the kind of game we want to be playing. We want to push our opponent for their resources and win through that, rather than just taking 6 straight prizes really quickly. Next up we have 2 Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet is really, really good in the Decidueye matchup. It means that you can throw Wobbuffet active and still have access to your hammers. So one of the big ways to be able to win against Decidueye is just running them out of energy. They only ever run 7, and under their own item lock it can sometimes be difficult for them to find them. They also often don't mind discarding them in the early turns to try and get the lock up. So if we can then bring up a Wobbuffet later on, hammer away some of their energy whilst they don't have items, and then paired with being able to crunch off some of their energy as well, they're eventually just going to be sort of stuck at dealing 20 or 40 a turn just with their abilities, and at that point we can start using our stronger attacks to take prizes. Just in general as well, Wobbuffet's going to be really good against people that try and Shaymin spam us and things like that. Obviously Lele is a psychic type, so it does get around Wobbuffet, but still being able to stop Shaymins and stuff is just really, really helpful. Speaking of Tapu Lele and Shaymin, we're running 2 Tapu Lele and 1 Shaymin. I think Tapu Lele is easily one of the best cards in the set, but the more I play with this card, it's just so strong. It means that you can play so many more like varied supporters. So being able to find this guy in the early turns is really good, just to be able to find a supporter, guarantee a supporter turn 1, but also grabbing your one-off supporters in the late game is really, really strong as well. It's going to mean that we can always grab the supporter we want if it's still in the deck, and if not, we have VS Seekers for it later on. So yeah, it's really, really nice. And I think the card pretty much speaks for itself. And similarly with Shaymin, just being able to draw, still having that option to be able to draw up to 6 is really, really strong. So I don't think I'd ever cut the Shaymin, just because sometimes that's the kind of draw you want. But having Tapu Lele now means that we guarantee a supporter, which is just super good. Onto the supporters themselves. Running 4 Sycamore, still the best supporter in format, so that's pretty much going to stay. Similarly with 3N, just having shuffle draw, especially with a format that's sort of full of item lock right now, having more copies of physical supporters is just really, really good. We're only playing 1 Lysandre simply because we have Bloodthirsty Eyes, so anything that isn't a Garb, anything that doesn't have a Garb in it, sorry, an ability lock and Garb at least, we have multiple Lysandres anyway. But in the matchups where our opponent does ability lock us, we still have copies of Lysandre to be able to use as well. So I don't think I think the deck obviously needs 1, but you don't need 2 like a lot of decks, just because you have the inbuilt Bloodthirsty Eyes, which is really, really strong. Especially if it doesn't use the supporter for the turn as well. It means you can do something like Bloodthirsty Eyes and then go into a Hex Maniac or one of our other one-off supporters. Yeah, Hex again, similarly. Being able to Hex against things like Decidueye is really, really strong, because then you can spam your hammers for a turn, use your VS Seekers, grab your supporters back, things like that. But just in general, with all of these Tapu Lele running around, and Shaymin and Hooper, and like the format's not changing that much, other than there's going to be more turn 1 abilities. So being able to Tapu Lele into Hex Maniac is really, really strong. And just being able to Hex in general in the early turns means that our opponent's setup is going to be hindered, which is kind of what the deck's going for anyway. Similarly with that, 1 Flare Grunt just means that we can discard multiple energy in a turn, try and put our opponent behind enough that they miss attacks. Being able to Flare Grunt into Crunch means that we're guaranteed discarding 2 if possible. So that's really, really strong, and it's going to mean that our opponent is, like I say, sometimes going to miss attacks, and we're going to start sort of building up the pressure and steamrolling from there. And then finally 1 Delinquent as well. Another of these really disruption supporters, just trying to run our opponent out of energy, that kind of thing. There's the stadium of choice in this deck is Brooklett Hill as well. So towards the end of the game, we're going to see less and less value. Brooklett Hill was really, really good in the early turns, but in the late turns, it's not as useful. So it's going to mean that we can happily discard our stadium with Delinquent, not worry about it too much, and still run our opponent out of energy and things like that, other resources in the late game. For VS Seeker, of course, all of these one-off supporters as well. We want to have access to them in the late game when we need them. For Ultra Ball, again, really, really strong, especially with having the Carbink breaks. It's going to mean that we are able to recover our energy that we discard with the Ultra Balls as well, even our strong energy and stuff. So yeah, Ultra Ball is definitely the best ball search in this deck. We're running a full 4 Crushing Hammer and 1 Enhanced Hammer. Again, we want to run our opponent out of energy, so we're running the full copies of Crushing Hammer, plus 1 Enhanced, just because, again, it's another guaranteed discard, so if we can against things like Decidueye, if we can get some form of ability lock, we can always guarantee ourselves at least somewhat disrupting them, and eventually they run out of steam and just are stuck with their abilities. But just in general, E-Hammer I think is still really, really useful. Ray seems to be getting a lot better, so just having them for Ray and stuff like that, I think it's just really, really strong. 2 Rescue Stretcher. Another really, really good card from the new set, letting us pick up our pretty much anything that we want back immediately. Being able to grab Lycanroc this kind of serves as a VS Seeker, which is really cool. But also being able to grab, because it's only a 2, like it's a 2-2 split. We are also able to pick up our attacker of choice. Maybe we don't want the ability, we just would prefer to have sort of more energy denial. So having that flexibility is really good, plus then having the flexibility of being able to shuffle 3 back into the deck in the late game if we need card advantage rather than a specific Pokemon immediately. It's just a really, really flexible card. 3 Choice Band, just to make the numbers nicer and push us into 1-shot and 2-shot range a lot easier. Like I say, with a Choice Band and 1 Strong Energy, we are going to be pushing the Lycanroc's damage up to 80, which means that we're sort of approaching 2-shot range, 2 to 3-shot range against some of these bigger GXs, rather than just poking for 30 a turn, which is really, really strong. And then a second Strong Energy is going to push that to 100, which is 2-shotting most EXs. So that's really, really good. But it's also going to mean, with 1 Strong and 1 Choice Band, the Lycanroc's second attack just does 3 for 170, which again is 1-shotting a few EXs. And the more, like we have access to more Strong Energy anyway, so we are going to be able to push this even further into 1-shot range if possible. So just having these extra damage boosters means that we can be an aggressive deck if we need to be, as well as sort of trying to run our opponent out of resources. We can do both. Complementing that, we also have 2 Floatstone. We don't really ever want to be stuck with a Wobbuffet in the active, because it's going to be hard for us to use things like Shaymin and the Lycanroc's ability. So being able to move them about is really useful. Plus being able to Floatstone a Carbink means that we can happily throw it up when our opponent, and going into our opponent's turn and stuff. And if we don't have an attack that turn, meaning that they're going to have to sort of force resources out of us to move us or knock us out. And if they don't, we have free retreat afterwards. And then just being able to move around our Lycanrocs as well is really, really good. Floatstone is just really, really good right now, I think. Finally, as I said, running 3 Brooklett Hill as our stadium, just in the early turns to increase consistency, make sure we can get multiple Lycanrocs out, make sure we can find Carbinks, that kind of thing. That paired with the Ultra Balls means that we pretty much get set up every game, just because we have that extra search. So yeah, and then in the late game we can happily fodder them with Delinquent to run our opponent out of more resources, which is really, really good. Finally, energy-wise, we are of course running 4 Strong Energy and 5 regular Fighting Energy. Just means that we have enough to be able to discard them happily with Sycamore and Ultra Ball for the Carbink, but we also have enough to guarantee an attachment in the early turns and make sure we're keeping up with our own energy attachments, and able to apply this pressure in the early game, rather than through damage, but through resource management and that kind of thing. So yeah, let me know what you think. I've really enjoyed this deck. I think it's potentially got a lot going for it. We just got to see how big some of these grass decks are. But obviously both of these Lycanrocs are weak to grass, which is a bit of an issue. But if you can dodge the grass matchups, it can sometimes sort of work out in your favour. And I think this has a pretty good game plan against anything, just because you have guaranteed discard. But yeah, it's a pretty fun deck. I'm really enjoying it. If there's anything you'd change, anything you'd adapt to the deck, please let us know down in the comments. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Stay tuned for lots more Guardian Rising deck analysis videos, hopefully daily videos for the next couple of weeks, through that and stream and things like that. And yeah, we should have our hands on these cards very soon. We will have PTGO hopefully by the end of this week as of recording. So yeah, we'll be back on there very soon, testing some of these decks out and seeing how they work. But yeah, other than that, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Omnipoke, and I look forward to seeing you guys in another video.